Good afternoon, YouTube. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. This is Archbishop John Lewis Jones Jr. Coming to you with another um, episode of Bishop's Words of Wisdom. Um, so, if you are enjoying these podcasts, please like and subscribe. It'll be up on the screen before the broadcast. Like and subscribe to the podcasts and leave your comments so we can read your comments and pray that you're enjoying the podcast and pray that it's being a blessing to you as well. Um, Today, we are going to um, cover a subject that is pretty prevalent in our society today. It's pretty prevalent in our in our society today, um, but it's okay. It's okay. And what we're talking about today is blended families. Blended families. Um, Years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, even, you didn't have a lot of blended families. You had the traditional families. You had a man coming together with a wife, with a woman, and those two, as they came together, she didn't have any kids. He didn't have any kids. They were coming together first time marriage, uh, and so that's what you had mostly. These days, um, for whatever reason, um, kids being born out of wedlock, divorce rate being what it is, you now have blended families. So it is what it is. Like it or not, that's where we are. We now have blended families. So because we have blended families, we have to adjust to whatever the climate is, and and whatever's happening during our day. Blended families. Um, I'll tell you, I'm a part of a blended family myself. My wife had a was married previously, and had three children. Three children were born to that marriage, in that marriage, and then her and I got married, and we have two children together, but biological children. So we have altogether we have five children. So I am not speaking on something that I don't know anything about. Very well versed in the ins and outs of having a blended family. So, uh, having a blended family, and I'll tell you, my wife and I started dating, and our first date was, there were five people on our first date. Our first date, we went to Ponderosa. I took her and the kids, her and her three children, to Ponderosa for our first date. And I had seen her at church, spoke to her, but had never dated her. And then we started dating in February of '87. And so she said, well, I have three kids. I said, okay, well, after church on Sunday, let's go on a date. And after church on that particular Sunday, we went and we um, went on a date, and we went to Ponderosa. Um, uh, Her, three kids, and myself. So there were five of us. Um, and yes, I fell in love with her. Still in love with her, and um, uh, so I said, I'm going to make this work. I have to make this work. Why? Because I'm in love with this woman. Okay. So um, uh, uh, the trick then becomes getting blended families to blend. Now, let me share this. There are myths concerning blended families. There are several myths concerning blended families. Um, how do you get the families to blend? Uh, uh, there are myths, again, concerning blended families that once you say I do, all the problems will go away. Once you say I do, everything will come together. Just like when you mix a cake and put the ingredients in for a cake, it's just going to all blend together and blend perfectly and be seamless. That's another myth. Um, Sometimes it doesn't all blend. You have to give it assistance. You have to give it help. And then you have those people that are outside. You have, um, you could have, say, if you're a male and you come to the marriage with children, then you could have the mother of your children causing problems. Uh, then the former husband could be or the father of the kids on her side could be causing problems. You have problems then because they will. Now, let me share this, especially when you move on. If that man is moving on, if that woman is moving on, if that person that's being left behind has not moved on, you're going to have a problem. I'll tell you right now, you're going to have a problem. They will make it rough on you. And so, look, if this is the person that God told you that this is your mate, then you still have to do what you need to do and just still try to make that family blend. Kids, unfortunately, become the pawns in all this. Why? Because you may have that father or you may have that mother saying different things about the potential mate, or saying things about the new mate, about the husband or about the wife that are not necessarily true, but because they have been left behind and there is a element of jealousy, then you have to deal with that. So sometimes that outside element then becomes an irritant to the situation. The Bible says, those whom God has joined together, let no man put asunder or separate. I often say when I perform weddings, I often say that speaks to two groups of people. The first group it speaks to the two individuals that are getting married, that they don't allow anyone from the outside to interfere in their marriage and try to separate them. Then it's giving a warning to those that are on the outside and telling them not to interfere with those marriages or that particular marriage. Those whom God has joined together allow. So now here we are in 2022, and what do we have? We have blended families. So there's several elements of blended families that we need to discuss today. There's several elements that we need to consider. So when you have a blended family, you have to consider the biological mother. You have to consider the biological father. What does that mean? That means that me as an individual, because I didn't have any children, I had to consider the biological father. Had to consider. I just couldn't come in and say, okay, I'm here. I'm taking his place. He no longer exists. Don't worry about him. I'm here now. No, couldn't do that. And I would not have even attempted to do that. Why? Because he was in their life longer before me, and those are his biological children. Okay, so the only thing I was interested in is just coming in and being a husband to my wife and being a father figure to the children. Okay, being a father figure to the children. Now, one of the things, and you may agree or disagree with this, one of the things when we first got married, I said to the children that I did not want to allow and would not allow, and that is the word step to be used in the house. Step denotes separatism. The word step. This is my stepbrother. This is my stepfather. Even as my biological children were born, I did not, and I would not, and still will not allow the word step to be used. What do you mean? Well, that is not their stepsister. That's their sister. That's not their stepbrother. That's their brother. Okay. Step will separate. Step will tear up. Okay. Because that word step means that we're not whole. I don't have to listen to you because you're just my stepsister. You're just my stepbrother. Okay. So I didn't allow that word step to interfere or to be used in our house. I just was against that. So, and now because the children were smaller, ages of 10, 5, and 4 when we got married. Ages of 10, 5, and 4. Okay. So these were small children. Okay, so these were small children. It's not like I married into a family and these children were grown. Okay, that wasn't it. So, 10, 5, 4. So that meant that, especially the 5-year-old and the 4-year-old, now they were of the age where they were impressionable. Okay, they were very, very impressionable, and I could sort of train them, teach them certain things in my way of thinking, using my wisdom, using godly wisdom. Not to say that it always was right, not to say that I always made the right decision, did the right thing, or said the right thing. Not perfect. I'm flawed as well. Okay, but but we were able to come together, and so now we have 5 children, 4 girls, 1 boy, and we have 11 grandchildren. And we still don't allow the word step to be used. And I see how our grandchildren, all of our grandchildren, use and how they interact with one another. And they don't use the word step. And because again, when you inject the word step, it just has a way of separating people, and it sends a message to each other. So we formed a blended family. We formed a blended family. Did everything always work? No. Did everything always? Was everything always smooth? No, it wasn't. Look, we had some rocky times. We had some rocky situations, some rocky circumstances that I wish that I could sit here and say that did not occur, but I cannot. So we had some very rocky situations, but we were able to work through and get through those things. So when you form the union, one of the first things that will probably come up is discipline. How are you going to discipline the children? Who's going to discipline the children? When will they be disciplined? Everybody doesn't agree, and now we're in a day in an age now where the state and the law has told us that you cannot discipline your children. If you discipline them, especially in public, then you are subject to be arrested, or you're subject to some sort of punishment because you have chosen to discipline your children. So then when you talk about children that are not your biological children, well then how do you discipline? So what I say to what I say to any individual, to anyone that's listening to this, discuss it with your mate. Discuss it with your mate. Have a talk. Discuss it with your mate, and you guys come to an agreement of how you're going to discipline. Let me backtrack for a minute. Once you get married, the same rules apply as far as who is first. The Bible says, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cling, be joined together with his wife, and those two shall become one flesh." Nowhere in the Bible does it state that you become one flesh with your child. You just don't do it. There is no covenant relationship that you, other than God, in the Bible, that you make other than with your mate. I was at a seminar several years ago, and a preacher from my hometown of Philadelphia was in Ohio for a seminar, and there was a young lady that was asking a question near the end of the seminar, and she actually was making a statement, and she said that she was about to get married, and she said, I'll be married within the next 60 days, I believe she said. She said, but I'm not going to take my new husband and put him above my kids. So they were, so the pastor of that church and the facilitator, not the facilitator, the person that was actually handling the seminar, they looked at me and said, Bishop, we want you to have remarks this time, and we want you to deal with the question or the subject matter that's on the floor. I said, are you sure? They said, yes. I said, okay. So when I got up, the young lady came back to the microphone, and I very politely and kindly said to her, I said, so you're saying that you're not going to put your new husband above your kids? She said, that's right. I said, don't marry him. Stay single. And people were, yeah. But you could tell some of this, I could look out there and see some of the people that were shaking their head and indicating, yes, he's right. And she said, wow. She said, you're telling me not to? I said, yeah. I said, if you are not going to put him first, as instructed by the Bible, if you're not going to put him first before your kids, as instructed by the vows that you're about to take, I said, if you don't think enough of him to put him above everybody, I said, then stay single. Don't marry him. She said, well, she said, my mother did that to us. My mother put her husband in front of us kids. And her mother was there, and the mother stood up and said, yes, I did. And I said to her and her mother, I said, your mother did the right thing. So needless to say, we went on. I had my remarks. We dismissed, and I got to talk to her after the marriage seminar. And she said, you were serious? Absolutely. Absolutely. I was serious. Why? Because if you're going to marry somebody, you can't turn around. And let me share this, especially in our community. I hear many women say, I'm not going to put no man in front of my kids. Stay single. Don't get married if you're not prepared to do that. Okay? Because your husband, your spouse comes first. Okay? Before any of your children. Okay? Even if they're your biological children. So even in a traditional sense, if the two of you, if you don't have kids, if he doesn't have kids or she doesn't have kids, you two come together and you produce children, and you start putting those children in front of that your mate, you're dead wrong. Okay? You're dead wrong. Why? Because the Bible instructs us not to. The Bible says that you and your mate are to become one flesh, not you and your children. Plus, there's a reason why. And let me share this reason why. One day, it could be, and if you just had a baby, one day, 18 years from now, 19 years from now, that kid is going to college, or that kid is going off to live their life. And one day, guess what you're going to have? It's called an empty nest. Okay, you're going to have an empty nest. And when you have an empty nest, if you put those children in front of your mate, you and your mate are going to sit there and look at one another and say, okay, who are you? Okay, what do we do now? You're going to have to get to know each other. Vessel. They're going to look for the weaker vessel, whoever will give them their way. If they have to play both ends against the middle to get their way, that's what they're going to do. So you need to discuss this prior to the wedding. Discuss it. Get it out of the way. And what do you do when you and your mate disagree? Go into the bedroom. Discuss it. Don't discuss it in front of the children, because I promise you that will be a mistake. Because then children these days are bright, and they pick up on things, and they will sit there and they will look to see who is on their side, who is going to do what they want them to do, and then they will look and see, wow, they're not agreeing. Okay, cool. And if they don't like the mate that has come into their life, okay, then they will turn around and cause problems in the marriage. So that's why these things need to be discussed away from the children. Okay, it's not a good idea for the children to see mom and dad having a slugfest, mom and dad having a knockout, drag out, mom and dad raising their voices. That's not good to see. I've heard children say, well, I want to see that because I want to see when things are not normal. No, it's not. No. Why? Because let me be honest with you. My marriage, your parents' marriage, is none of your business. I don't care if you have a blended family or not. I don't care if you say, well, the kids are part. No, they're not in. No. Certain parts of the marriage they should not play a part in. Certain parts of the marriage they shouldn't get involved with. Why? Because it's none of their business. Okay, so disciplining needs to be discussed. Then there may be a need to bring in the ex. There may be a need to bring in the former mate. Maybe a need to bring in the biological father or the biological mother. That may call for a sit down. You may have to have a sit down with them to discuss some things. If that's the case, okay. Now, here's what you have to prepare for. Just suppose that relationship did not end well. It ended on bad terms. It ended in verbal discord. Okay, well, you're going to have to deal with that. Why? Because you have children. Okay, so especially here you have this person, and you have to let your ex know, this is not my boyfriend, this is my husband, or this is not my girlfriend, this is my wife. Okay, why is it important to do that? Because that shows the level of commitment. Okay, in other words, this is not today's girlfriend. This is not this week's girlfriend. This is not this month's girlfriend. And then next month I have a different girl that we have to come over, and I have somebody different that's living with me. No, this is my wife, or this is my husband. So this is the person that I stood before God and witnesses and took vows. Okay, and took vows. Okay, so I have to make sure that you honor the fact that I'm married. Okay, so you have to honor my marriage, whether you agree with it or not. It doesn't matter. But you have to honor the fact that this is the person that I'm committed to now. Okay, and then you have to make sure that you may have to make sure that the ex stay in their lane. Okay, look, some people just face it. Some people may get out of their lane. Okay, if they get out of their lane, okay, fine. Sometimes you may have to gently, and let me say it like that, gently nudge. If you have the kids during that time, then come on, you have relinquished that particular right. So it is important. It's very important that we uh, uh, push back on our former mates. That we have guidelines. Again, these things must be talked about prior to walking down the aisle, prior to marriage. There should be, honestly, there should be a meeting of the minds. There needs to be a meeting of the minds. There needs to be a meeting of the minds between your new spouse, your new husband, or your new wife, and the kids that you produced from that previous marriage. Has to be talked about. There's no way around it, especially if the kids are small. If the kids are all grown, to be honest, you don't